Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today, we're going to kind of shift gears a little bit
Yeah.
and put on our investor hats.
Oh, fun.
Yeah, so we are going to be looking at Shakti Pumps,
Okay.
which is an Indian company in the pumps and motors business.
Yeah.
So we've got a whole bunch of financial statements,
Hmm.
board meeting outcomes, actually all the way from April to October 2024.
Wow.
And our goal today is to see if Shakti Pumps is something that our listeners would be interested in investing in.
I love it. Yeah, let's dive in and really analyze this company from that investor perspective.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So let's just jump right in and start with the financials, because I think that's always a good place to start, right?
Yeah. Oh,
When you're
dude.
evaluating an investment.
The heart and soul.
Yeah, exactly. And right off the bat, we're seeing some pretty impressive revenue growth in both the June and September quarterly reports.
Yeah, for sure. And I think it's not just slight growth. We're seeing some pretty significant jumps.
Mm-hmm.
When we look at the quarter ending June 30th, consolidated revenue was 570.52 crore. And then by September 30th, it had climbed to 640.32 crore rupees.
Yeah, and we're seeing that similar story when we look at the standalone figures too, right?
Exactly.
So
Yeah.
it's like 560.31 crore in June, and then leaping to 631.83 crore in September.
Mm-hmm. It definitely paints a picture of a company on a strong growth trajectory.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And just to give our listeners a little bit more context, if we look even further back to the March 31st quarter, you see consolidated revenue of 610.13 crore
Mm-hmm.
and standalone of 588.04.
Yeah, and even compared to like the previous year, June 2023, consolidated revenue was only 113.60 crore.
Wow.
So it's really been quite a remarkable journey for them.
Yeah, absolutely. But revenue is only part of the story, right?
Right.
As investors, we also want to see healthy profit margins.
Oh, for sure. We want to know how much of that revenue is actually translating into profit.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Because it's not just about how much a company brings in, it's about how much they keep.
Exactly. Yeah, and that's where analyzing these figures like PBT and PAT become really important because they give us an idea of, how much profit they're making before and after paying taxes, which is a good indicator of, their profitability and efficiency.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So let's take a look at Shakti Pumps. What are those numbers telling us?
Mm-hmm.
Well, for the June 2024 quarter, we see a consolidated PBT of 125.58 crore and a PT of 92.85 crore.
Not bad.
And then the September quarter shows a PBT of 138.45 crore and a PT of 101.22 crore.
So pretty consistent, right? And in line with that revenue growth.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So they're not only bringing in more revenue, but they're also maintaining those strong profit margins.
Which is what we like to see as investors.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So we've established they've got a good track record of, impressive revenue growth and healthy profit margins.
Right.
But what about their plans for the future?
Yeah.
It looks like they've got some pretty ambitious expansion efforts in the works.
Yeah, they're not just sitting around. They're really looking to expand their footprint. And it's not just in India, they're going global.
Yeah, you're talking about the subsidiaries they've set up in the UAE, USA, and Bangladesh.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
Wow, that's pretty impressive.
Yeah, and they're really strategically raising capital to kind of fuel all these initiatives,
Mm-hmm.
which brings us to that 200 crore they raised.
Yeah, the QIP.
Yes, through the qualified institutional placement back in March,
Mm-hmm.
which is essentially a way for companies to raise capital by issuing shares to qualified institutional buyers.
Yeah, it's a pretty big deal that they were able to secure that much funding.
Yeah, I think it speaks volumes about investor confidence in the company's future.
Yeah, absolutely. So it seems like they're not just thriving in the present, but they're also really setting themselves up for future success.
For sure.
But before we get too carried away, let's, not forget about the importance of leadership and governance.
Yeah. But
Even the most promising business can, really struggle if it's not well managed.
absolutely. Good corporate governance is essential for any company, especially for building that long-term trust with investors.
Yeah. And it looks like Shakti Pumps is taking it seriously.
Yeah, they've made some interesting changes at the board level,
Mm-hmm.
like appointing new independent directors.
Right. And reconstituting some of those key committees,
Yeah.
like the Audit Committee and the Risk Management Committee. What's your take on all of that?
Well, I think it really shows a commitment to strengthening their oversight and accountability. Those independent directors, they can bring fresh perspectives
Yeah.
and really help ensure that the company is acting in the best interests of all the shareholders. And, the reconstitution of those committees, it suggests a focus on improving risk management and financial transparency, which are all good things.
Yeah. So it sounds like they're taking steps to ensure that their growth is not just rapid, but also sustainable and well-managed.
Exactly.
But, let's not forget that every business operates within a specific market.
Right.
And understanding that market is, crucial for evaluating a potential investment.
Absolutely. We need to look beyond the company's internal operations and consider that external environment.
Yeah, so how do we do that?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think one of the best ways is by analyzing their segment performance.
Yeah.
Great idea.
Yeah.
And luckily, our sources actually give us a breakdown of revenue and profit by geography.
Perfect. So you can see how they're performing in India versus overseas.
Yeah, exactly. And it's pretty clear that the India segment is dominating in terms of revenue
For sure.
for both June and September quarters.
Yeah.
But we also see a consistent contribution from that overseas segment.
Yeah, that's interesting. It's smaller, but it's still there.
Yeah, and that's something that investors would want to pay close attention to, right?
Absolutely.
How is that overseas segment performing compared to the India segment? Is it growing at a faster rate? Are the profit margins comparable? These are all questions that you'd want to explore further
Exactly.
to really understand the potential of their global ambitions.
Yeah, to see if that international expansion is actually translating into meaningful growth.
Okay, so we've covered a lot, but there's one more really crucial area we need to explore.
Let me guess, cash flow.
You got it.
Cash is king after all.
That's what you always say.
I do.
And it's so true because cash flow analysis is essential for understanding a company's financial health and sustainability.
Right. It goes beyond just looking at those profit figures. It tells us how effectively they're generating cash from their operations and how they're using that cash to invest in the future. And also, reward shareholders.
Yeah. So let's dive into those consolidated cash flow statements for Shakti pumps.
All right, let's do it.
And see what they reveal.
I'm excited to see what we find.
Me too.
When you're evaluating a company like this as a potential investment, it's kind of like peeling back the layers of an onion.
Ooh, like that.
Yeah, you start with those financials, but to really understand the business, you need to go deeper. You need to look at, their operations and their strategy and their leadership. And one of those layers that I think we haven't fully peeled back yet is that segment performance.
Yeah.
Those sources give us that detailed breakdown of revenue and profit split between India and overseas.
Right, and that's so important because it gives us, a more granular view
Exactly.
of where they're generating their revenue and, are certain segments outperforming others. So looking at the numbers, it's pretty clear that the India segment is like the powerhouse.
Yeah, it's driving the majority of the revenue.
So for the quarter ending June 30th, 2024,
Okay.
the India segment contributed 593.82 crore.
Wow.
And then the overseas segment was only 22.67 crore.
Okay.
And that trend continues in the September quarter. India bringing in 706.52 crore and overseas 24.79 crore.
So yeah, the international business is contributing, but the domestic market is definitely where they're strongest.
Yeah, for sure. But here's something I think is interesting.
Yeah.
Even though that overseas segment is starting from a smaller base,
Right.
it is showing consistent growth,
Oh, that's great.
which could suggest that, those international expansion efforts are starting to gain some traction.
Yeah. I think as potential investors, that's what we want to see, right? Like, is their growth strategy actually working?
Yeah. Are they able to, replicate that success?
Exactly. And not just in their existing markets,
Right.
but in those new territories too.
Exactly. But as investors, we can't just assume that this growth will continue, right?
Of course not.
We need to dig a little deeper and ask some critical questions.
What?
Well, for example, are the profit margins in the overseas segment comparable to those in the India segment? Are they facing any unique challenges in those international markets?
Yeah, good questions. And that's why, the segment analysis is so important for investors.
Right.
It forces us to look beyond just those, overall numbers and really understand the dynamics of the different parts of the business.
Yeah. And so while it's encouraging to see, some growth in the overseas segment,
Right.
we always have to remember that international expansion can come with its own set of risks and challenges. And as investors, we need to weigh those risks against the potential rewards.
Absolutely.
Okay, so let's shift gears a little bit
Okay.
and talk about leadership and corporate governance.
Sounds good.
Strong leadership and good corporate governance are absolutely essential for any company's long-term success. It's about, having the right people at the helm, making sound decisions,
Right.
ensuring that there's transparency and accountability, and from what we see in these board meeting outcomes,
Mm-hmm.
it seems like Shakti Pumps is taking this pretty seriously.
Yeah, it looks like they've been really proactive.
Yeah, one of the things that stood out to me was the reconstitution of several key committees,
Oh, yeah.
like the Audit Committee,
Yeah.
Nomination and Remuneration Committee, Stakeholders Relationship Committee,
Right, right.
Corporate Social Responsibility Committee,
Mm-hmm.
and the Risk Management Committee.
Wow, they've been busy.
Yeah, and on July 20th, 2024, they made some pretty significant changes to the composition of these committees,
Interesting.
including appointing several new independent
Oh,
directors.
that's always a good sign.
Yeah, and these committees, they play really vital roles
Mm-hmm.
in overseeing, various aspects of the company's operations.
Right, from financial reporting to executive compensation
Yeah.
to, risk management.
Yeah, exactly. And having those independent directors on board can really help to ensure that
Mm-hmm.
the company's actions are in the best interests of all the shareholders, not just a select few.
Yeah, it's all about checks and balances,
Yeah.
right? Preventing conflicts of interest and promoting that ethical behavior.
Exactly. So it seems like they're really trying to create a more transparent and accountable corporate culture.
Mm-hmm. I think that's a positive sign for sure.
Yeah, I agree. Okay, so let's turn our attention back to those financials,
Okay.
specifically the consolidated cash flow statements.
Love it.
We touched on this briefly earlier, but I think it deserves a closer look.
I agree. Cash flow analysis is so important.
Mm.
It's fundamental to, sound investing.
Yeah, because it helps us understand
Mm-hmm.
how a company is generating and using its cash.
Exactly.
And that gives us insights into their operational efficiency and financial stability.
Mm-hmm.
And remember, cash flow is like the lifeblood of any business.
It keeps things running.
Yeah, it allows for investments in growth and ultimately determines a company's ability to generate value for its shareholders.
Mm-hmm.
So by analyzing those cash flow statements, we can get a much clearer picture of their financial health
For sure.
than just by looking at their profit and loss statement.
Mm-hmm.
So let's break down Shakti Pump's cash flow into 3 key areas:
Right.
cash flow from operating activities, cash flow from investing activities,
Mm-hmm.
and cash flow from financing activities.
Mm-hmm.
So starting with operating activities,
Okay.
this represents the cash that's generated from their core business operations.
Mm-hmm. In this case, selling pumps and motors.
Exactly. And looking at the numbers,
Okay.
we see that they generate a pretty robust 543.77 crore
Mm-hmm.
from their operating activities
Mm-hmm.
for the year ending March 31st, 2024.
That's great.
It's a really positive sign.
Mm-hmm.
It tells us that they're not just profitable on paper,
Right.
but they're actually generating cash from their day-to-day business.
Which is what we want to see.
Yeah, and this strong operating cash flow,
Mm-hmm.
provides them with that financial flexibility to reinvest in growth,
Mm-hmm.
to pay dividends to shareholders, and to kind of navigate any potential economic headwinds.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so let's move on to cash flow from investing activities.
Yeah.
This category focuses on, their investments in assets like property, plant, and equipment.
Mm-hmm. Or acquisitions.
Exactly. And for Shakti Pumps, we see a significant cash outflow of 668.06 crore in this area
Okay.
for the year ending March 31st, 2024.
So they're spending money.
Yeah, but that's not necessarily a bad thing.
Right.
It likely reflects their investments in, all those expansion efforts.
Mm-hmm.
Building new facilities, upgrading existing ones, venturing into those new markets.
Exactly. All those things require a lot of money.
But it's important for investors to kind of assess the timing and scale of those investments.
Right. Are they spreading out their investments over a reasonable time frame? Are they taking on too much debt to finance these expansions?
Yeah, those are important questions to consider.
Absolutely.
And finally, let's look at cash flow from financing activities.
Okay.
This category covers, all those activities related to raising capital, repaying debt, paying dividends.
Right.
And here we see a massive inflow for Shakti Pumps,
Oh, wow.
primarily driven by the proceeds from that QIP equity share issuance.
Back in March.
Right. They raised a substantial 200 crore through that offering.
So that really helped their financial position.
Yeah, it gives them a lot of resources to pursue their growth strategy.
Mm-hmm. But, it's important to remember raising capital is just one piece of the puzzle.
Right.
It's how they use that capital that matters.
Yeah, are they investing it wisely? Are they being disciplined with their spending?
Are they managing their debt responsibly?
Yeah, these are all critical considerations. One of the most common mistakes I see investors make is focusing too much on, a company's reported profits and not enough on its cash flow.
Yeah, it's easy to get caught up in the excitement of those growing revenues and profits.
Mm-hmm.
But cash flow is really what matters at the end of the day.
Right. It's the fuel that drives a company's growth
Mm-hmm.
and its ability to create value for shareholders.
Exactly. And by looking at those cash flow statements, we can get a much clearer picture of their financial health and sustainability. We can see how efficiently they're generating cash from operations,
Right.
how they're investing for the future, and how they're managing those financial obligations.
So as we move forward in our deep dive into Shakti pumps, let's keep this focus on cash flow in mind.
Yeah, good idea.
It's a really crucial piece of the puzzle when evaluating any potential investment.
For sure.
Now, we've talked a lot about the company's financial performance,
Mm-hmm.
but what about the people behind the numbers?
Yeah, let's talk about the leadership.
Right. Let's see what insights we can glean from their actions.
Because those people leading the company can make all the difference. You know, their vision, their strategy, their execution,
Right.
all of that can determine whether a company thrives or fails.
Exactly. And our sources provide some interesting details about their leadership,
Oh, yeah.
particularly in the context of their expansion efforts.
Mm-hmm.
Remember we were talking about their ambitious plans to expand both domestically and internationally?
Right.
Well, it seems like they're not just talking the talk, they're walking the walk.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah, they've established that new corporate office in Indore, which often signals that a company is, preparing for a larger scale of operations.
Mm-hmm.
And they've also been, aggressively expanding that global presence.
Right, by setting up those subsidiaries.
In the UAE, the USA, and Bangladesh.
So it really shows a commitment to growing beyond, their traditional markets.
Yeah, it's like they're planting seeds in all this new fertile ground, hoping to cultivate a global harvest of success.
I like that analogy.
But as with any, ambitious endeavor,
Mm-hmm.
there are risks involved.
Fierce.
Expanding into new markets can be really challenging. Different countries have different regulations, different cultural nuances, different competitive landscapes.
Right. It's like navigating a whole new maze. You need to be really strategic and adaptable.
Right. And maybe even a little bit lucky
Yeah.
to find your way to the center.
And I think investors need to assess whether Shakti Pumps really has that experience, the resources, the strategic acumen to navigate all of that complexity successfully.
Yeah. Have they done their due diligence?
Mm-hmm.
Are they prepared for the challenges that lie ahead?
Yeah, those are all important questions.
Because international expansion can be a powerful growth driver, but it can also be a source of significant risk
For sure.
if it's not executed properly. Now, let's not forget about that other significant move they made
What's that?
to support their growth strategy, raising that capital through that QIP back in March.
Right.
They secured an impressive 200 crore through that offering.
Which gives them a lot of financial firepower to pursue those plans.
Yeah, but as we've said before, raising capital is just one piece of the puzzle.
It's how they allocate it that matters.
Right. Are they investing in projects with strong return potential? Are they being disciplined in their spending? Are they managing their debt levels responsibly? It's like being handed this toolbox full of powerful tools. You need to know which tool to use for each job.
Right.
And how to use it effectively to get that desired outcome.
Exactly. And investors need to scrutinize, how the leadership is using that financial toolbox.
Yeah. Are they making wise investments? Are they being responsible stewards of shareholder capital? These are all things that we need to consider when evaluating any potential investment.
Absolutely.
Because even the most promising business can falter if its leadership makes poor decisions or fails to execute its strategy effectively.
Right.
Okay, so we've talked about their financial performance, their expansion efforts, their leadership. But there's one more really crucial layer that I think we need to peel back
What's that?
to get a complete picture of the company.
Okay.
And that's corporate governance.
Of course.
Good corporate governance is like the foundation of a well-built house. You can have, the most beautiful design, the finest materials. But if the foundation is weak, the entire structure is at risk.
Exactly.
And thankfully, our sources give us some valuable insights into their approach to corporate governance.
Oh, that's good.
Remember how we talked about the reconstitution of those key committees, including the audit committee and the risk management committee? These changes, they really signal a commitment to strengthening oversight and accountability and the appointment of those new independent directors to those committees.
Right.
It brings fresh perspectives. And it helps to ensure that the company's actions are in the best interest of all the shareholders.
Mm-hmm.
So all of these moves, they suggest that Shakti Pumps is taking corporate governance seriously.
Which is a good sign.
Yeah, and that's a positive sign for investors because good corporate governance
Mm-hmm.
can really help to mitigate risks, build trust, and ultimately create that long-term value.
Exactly.
So as we continue our deep dive into Shakti Pumps,
Mm-hmm.
let's keep this focus on corporate governance in mind. It's a crucial aspect of evaluating any potential investment.
Mm.
And it can really provide those valuable insights into a company's long-term prospects.
Mm-hmm.
Now, we've spent a lot of time, analyzing Shakti Pumps from all these different angles.
Right.
But there's one area that I think we haven't explored yet,
And what's that?
and that's the industry landscape.
Oh, okay. The bigger picture.
Yeah, in which they operate.
Mm-hmm.
So we need to think about, what's the overall health of that pumps and motors sector?
Mm-hmm.
What are the key trends and challenges?
What about the competition?
Yeah, who are the major players?
Mm-hmm.
How does Shakti Pumps stack up?
Exactly. We need to assess that competitive landscape
Mhm.
and understand the forces that could impact, their future performance.
Yeah. Are they operating in a growing market?
Mm-hmm.
Are there any technological advancements that could disrupt their business?
Are they facing a lot of competition
Mm.
from either established players or new entrants?
Yeah, these are all really important questions to consider because even the most well-managed company
Mm-hmm.
can struggle if they're operating in a declining industry
Right.
or facing these insurmountable competitive pressures.
Mm-hmm.
And understanding that industry landscape
Mm-hmm.
can help us identify, those potential risks and opportunities.
Absolutely.
That might not be apparent when we're just, looking at Shakti Pump's financials in isolation.
Yeah, you need that context.
Mm-hmm. So as we move forward in our deep dive,
Okay.
let's broaden our lens a little bit
Mhm.
and take a closer look at that pumps and motors sector.
Sounds good.
Let's see how Shakti Pumps fits into the bigger picture
Mm-hmm.
and what factors could influence their long-term success.
One of the things I love about investing
What's the...
is that it's not just about analyzing numbers. It's about understanding stories.
Ooh, I like that.
Yeah. And what's the story behind Shakti Pumps? Well, it's a story of, innovation and growth and ambition.
Mm.
It's a company that started in a small town in India
Mhm.
and has grown into this, global player in the pumps and motors industry.
Yeah, it's a company that's not afraid to take risks, expand into new markets.
Invest in its future.
Right.
But it's also a story that's still being written.
That's a good point.
And, as investors, we have the opportunity to participate in that story, to be a part of its next chapter.
But before we jump in with both feet,
Right.
we need to make sure we understand that story fully.
Mm-hmm.
We need to read between the lines,
Mm-hmm.
analyze the characters.
Anticipate those plot twists.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what we've been doing throughout this entire deep dive.
Exactly. We've been, dissecting their financials,
Mm-hmm.
examining their leadership,
Mm-hmm.
exploring their growth strategy.
Assessing their corporate governance.
Right. We've been trying to understand, their strengths and their weaknesses,
Mhm.
their opportunities, their threats.
Right. Trying to separate the hype from reality.
Yeah.
The facts from the speculation.
And I think, as we approach kind of the final chapter of our deep dive,
Mm-hmm.
we're starting to get a much clearer picture
Mm-hmm.
of Shakti Pump's story.
Yeah.
So let's move on to that final chapter. Let's
go.
tie together all those threads that we've been weaving
Mm-hmm.
and see what insights we can draw from all of our analysis.
Let's do it.
Let's see if Shakti Pump's story is one that we want to be a part of.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So we've spent, a good amount of time really digging into Shakti Pumps.
Yeah, we've looked at it from all angles.
Yeah. We've explored their financials, their expansion plans, their leadership, even their corporate governance.
Mm-hmm. Segment, performance, cash flow, the whole 9 yards.
Yeah. So after all of that, what's the verdict?
The big question.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is this a company worth investing in?
Well, like with any investment, there's never an easy answer.
Right.
There are a lot of positive signs for sure.
Hmm.
They've shown that impressive revenue growth.
Mm-hmm.
They've maintained those healthy profit margins.
Right.
They're actively investing in their future. Their expansion efforts, both domestically and internationally,
Right.
are really ambitious and could lead to significant growth down the road.
Yeah. And their commitment to strengthening corporate governance,
Mhm.
suggests that they're taking the right steps to ensure that that growth is sustainable
Exactly.
and responsible.
But it's important to remember, every investment has risks.
Of course.
And we need to consider things like industry competition,
Right.
macroeconomic conditions, their ability to execute their strategy effectively.
Yeah, what if those international expansion plans don't pan out? What if there's a sudden downturn in, the pumps and motors sector?
Exactly.
What if their leadership, makes some missteps along the way?
Those are all valid concerns, and that's why it's so important to do your due diligence.
Right.
You can't just rely on the information that we've gone over in this deep dive.
Hmm.
You need to do your own research.
Yeah.
Consult with financial advisors and really weigh those potential risks and rewards
Right.
before making any investment decisions.
So for our listeners who are intrigued by Shakti pumps, and I'm sure there are a lot of you out there,
I would think so.
remember, this deep dive has really just been a starting point.
A jumping off point,
Yeah.
a springboard for your own exploration.
Mhm.
Yeah. Go deeper into those financial statements,
Right.
read some industry reports, compare Shakti pumps to its competitors,
Yeah.
and don't be afraid to ask those tough questions and challenge your own assumptions.
Yeah, exactly. Investing is a journey of continuous learning and discovery. And the more knowledge you acquire, the better equipped you'll be to make those informed decisions
Absolutely.
that align with your investment goals and risk tolerance.
And remember, there are no guarantees in the stock market.
That's true.
But if you approach it with, a thoughtful, analytical mindset, you can increase your chances of success.
Yeah. So keep exploring, keep learning, and as always, happy investing.